They laughed when they saw him, mocking his size, his skin, and the way he carried himself. To them, he was just another fat black man who didn't belong in this neighborhood. But as they slammed him against the hood of his car, one of the officers noticed something that made his blood run cold. A tattoo, a patch, a name that should never have been messed with. He tried to cover his fear, but it was too late. The man they humiliated wasn't an ordinary civilian. He was Delta Force. What happens when those who abuse power realize they just disrespected someone who is power itself? Marcus Johnson wasn't a man who looked for trouble. After years serving his country in the shadows, he'd traded the sound of gunfire for the quiet hum of suburban life. To his neighbors, he was just the big guy who smiled at everyone, mowed his lawn on weekends, and kept mostly to himself. Few knew he'd spent 2 decades in the world's most elite military unit, Delta Force. That morning, Marcus was on his way to visit an old army buddy. He wore a faded hoodie, sweatpants, and carried a gym bag. Nothing fancy. But as he drove through a wealthy neighborhood, he noticed something, eyes following him, judgment in every glance. He'd seen that look before, overseas, in combat zones, only this time it wasn't an enemy watching him. It was suspicion born from prejudice, and when flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror, Marcus's calm heart began to drum. Deep down, he knew this wasn't just a traffic stop. It was the beginning of something much darker. Marcus slowed his car, heart steady but mind alert. The flashing red and blue lights painted his dashboard in warning. He pulled over, rolling down his window, both hands visible. Years of training taught him that sudden moves could turn deadly when skin color became a threat. 2 officers stepped out. Their swagger said everything before their mouths did. One, tall and pale, smirked as he approached. "Evening, sir. You lost? Not many folks like you around here." Marcus kept his tone calm. "Just passing through, officer. Headed to a friend's place." The second cop circled the car, peering through the windows like Marcus was hiding something dangerous. "Mind telling us what's in the bag?" he asked sharply. "It's just gym clothes," Marcus replied, but they didn't believe him. The first officer leaned in, his voice colder now. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus obeyed, moving slowly, hands raised. His calm made them angrier, like his quiet dignity was some kind of defiance. They frisked him roughly, pulling at his hoodie, mocking his weight. "Big guy like you? What are you, a bouncer?" One sneered. Marcus said nothing. Years of discipline told him to stay composed. But inside, he could feel that familiar burn of humiliation, one he'd fought his whole life to escape. Then came the breaking point. They dumped his gym bag on the ground, scattering his clothes. A folded ID tag slipped out, one with a name, a code, and a small insignia. The officer picked it up, frowning. "What's this?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He wanted to see if they'd notice. The patch bore the emblem of the U.S. Army's Delta Force. The tall officer's grin faltered. "Delta, as in Special Operations?" Marcus met his eyes, steady and quiet. "Yes, sir. That kind of Delta." For a moment, silence wrapped the street. The men who'd mocked him were now realizing they'd just harassed someone who had led missions they couldn't even imagine. But Marcus wasn't done. He took a step closer, his voice low but sharp. "You wanted to know what's in the bag? That's 20 years of service. 20 years of protecting people who look exactly like you." The officers exchanged nervous glances. One stammered. We didn't mean—" Marcus interrupted. "You meant every word, until you found out who I was." Their faces flushed with guilt and fear. But before they could speak again, a police sergeant's car pulled up. Someone had called for backup. And that's when things got even more complicated. The sergeant stepped out of his cruiser, tension crackling in the air. He was older, with years of authority written across his face. But the moment his eyes fell on Marcus standing beside the patrol car, something changed. He recognized that insignia instantly. "What the hell is going on here?" the sergeant demanded. The 2 officers stiffened, their earlier confidence evaporating. "Just a routine stop, sir," one mumbled. Marcus didn't flinch. "Routine?" he said quietly. "You pulled me over for driving while black. You mocked me, humiliated me, and threw my service ID in the dirt." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "Is that true?" Silence. The only sound was the soft wind brushing through the trees. Marcus bent down, picked up his badge from the ground, and held it out. I served under that flag, he said. Fought for a country that still sees me as a suspect. One of the officers tried to explain, voice trembling. We didn't know who you were. Marcus's eyes burned with restrained anger. That's the problem. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. The words hung heavy, echoing louder than the sirens ever could. The sergeant looked between them, shame darkening his expression. He knew what came next. Reports, internal reviews, damage control. But Marcus didn't care about their paperwork. He cared about dignity, about justice. He turned to leave, but before getting into his car, he stopped and looked back at them. You judge the uniform I wear on the outside, he said. But the real uniform, the one that matters, is the one under my skin. And that's something you'll never understand. The officers stood frozen, realizing the weight of what they'd done. Marcus closed his car door slowly, the engine humming to life. But as he drove away, blue and red lights still flashing behind him, the question lingered in his mind. And in the minds of everyone watching. How many more have to wear a uniform just to be treated like human beings? Marcus didn't file a complaint. He didn't shout, threaten, or demand revenge. He'd seen enough of the world to know that justice on paper doesn't always fix what's broken inside people. Instead, he drove home in silence, his thoughts heavy but clear. That night, he sat on his porch, watching the sunset fade behind quiet streets, the same streets where he'd been humiliated just hours before. His service medals glimmered faintly in the light, reminders of battles fought abroad, and the one he still faced at home. A week later, he received a visit from the same sergeant. The department had opened an internal investigation. Both officers were suspended. The sergeant apologized, not as a cop, but as a man. Marcus listened quietly, then nodded. Change starts when someone finally admits they were wrong, he said. But deep down, Marcus knew this wasn't just about him. His story was one of thousands. Black men and women judged not by their worth, but by the color of their skin. And unlike the missions he led overseas, this fight had no clear enemy, only a system that forgot what humanity looked like. He stood looking at the flag waving from his porch. I fought for freedom, he murmured. Now I just want to live in it. The camera lingers on his face, calm, strong, but marked by the weight of truth. His final words echo like a challenge to every viewer. If respect depends on rank, badge, or uniform, then what does that say about the world we live in? The screen fades to black, leaving one simple message. Racism doesn't end when it's exposed. It ends when we choose to see each other as equals.